This is Perry Peacock with Wilderness Innovation, and today's audio cast or podcast, whatever we might want to call it at this point, is it's kind of my verbal commentary on a blog that I wrote earlier in the week, and that blog was stimulated by some conversations that I'd had recently in the last few months. In addition to Christopher Noble's really nice article that he wrote on his website, Master Woodsman, and the title of his post there is "Leave No Trace Killed Woodcraft," almost, and he does. I would recommend to everyone that's interested in this subject to go to Master Woodsman and read his article there. It's very nicely done. It's a little bit lengthy for something like a blog. I printed the thing out. It's 11 pages. So he does give a history of Leave No Trace. He kind of goes through a lot of details about that, and it's very, it's well documented and everything there. So I don't intend to repeat any of, as far as going through, reading through what he's put forth there. Mostly because usually what I want to do is I want to put my take on things, and so he stimulated my my desire to put out my thoughts of what I think about it all, and so that's kind of where my blog came from. And in looking at all that, I thought, well, I could probably give a little bit more detail and such in a audio cast than I'd feel like typing. But anyway, I mean, for me, I'd like to start out just telling a little story. When I was a kid, I guess probably in my, it would have had to been in my early teens. I had a friend of mine who his parents had built a nice house and furnished the inside of the house just exquisitely, really, really, really nice. And one of the problems was nobody could go into the house. I mean, he wasn't allowed to have friends over. Friends couldn't come in the house. I mean, it's just kind of unusual. I mean, normally you visit among friends' houses and such as that, but his house, that was not allowed. All friends had to stay outside. And I, during all the years I knew him, I got to go in the house one time, and the whole house was carpeted in white carpet, and everything was very delicate and fragile, the decorations and different things like that. So the house was, it was more like a museum than a house to be lived in, and I remember as a kid even thinking, that was kind of sad that this friend of mine couldn't ever have his friends over. He could never do anything there. And I thought, well, what's the value of a house that nobody can see? And to me, that story kind of illustrates a little bit of some of the extremes that I think personally that some of the Leave No Trace philosophy has gone to is kind of inhibiting some of the things that we really treasure about the outdoors. And that's part of Christopher's point in his article is, that it started out with kind of a good idea and that sort of thing, and everything, and over time it kind of became more and more involved and has kind of taken on a life of its own, so to speak. and I know one of my good friends is Steve Despain, the owner of Firebox Outdoors, maker of the Firebox stoves, and we've discussed some of this ourselves, and I'm not gonna tell you his viewpoint on anything. That's because that's his responsibility. But I know in talking with him, he's had a lot of recommendations or comments or commentary from people who watch his videos or people who email him or whatever, comment in whatever way, that they get very concerned that his stoves are not or may not be. I'm not saying they are or are not. That's up to whoever to judge, I guess. But people will comment, that perhaps they're not zero trace or not close enough to zero trace or something like that. And, making sure he has ash pans on there to catch any ashes that might fall. So, so this isn't a full-blown fire. It's just a stove that can burn wood. Just a small, his stove, 5x5 stove. And yet some people are very, very concerned that some ash or some particle of a fire might get out into the environment and ruin it. And so people were asking, about burning a fire that left no residue or that sort of thing. And so I know he's had quite a bit of commentary that way directed at him. To me, my own thing, my own opinion, that's quite a bit extreme, I think. But nevertheless, that's where the philosophy has come to. And one of the things pointed out in Chris's article is that the onset of fuel burning stoves came into being as a way of getting away from the campfire, which apparently was ruining everything, and so fuel, liquid fuel burning stoves, that sort of thing, or gas, those are all considered as better than a campfire because they leave no trace. But Chris mentioned in the article that's not entirely true, really, because there is a trace. The trace might not be at the campsite, but all these stoves, they have to be manufactured somewhere. There's so if you really want to get at it, there's a footprint of the manufacturing of those stoves. There's the obtaining of whatever type of fuel they're using and the refining process and the bottling, canning process of, whatever it might be, whichever type of fuel. So, there's all kinds of, if you want to get down to it, there's all kinds of footprints, all kinds of traces being left even by those that, it may not really, in the long run, it may not really be any better per se as far as leave no trace. So my commentary really isn't so much about leave no trace as it is just about some common sense, and that's what my brief little blog kind of was aiming at. Was, look, let's use a little common sense. And so, I listed in my blog, and I'll kind of repeat some of that here, but I listed some of the things that bug me about irresponsibility in the outdoors, and some of those things are one of them that really bothers me is people that I call them hatchet men, and it drives me just wild. I think it was last year, I did a little video on hatchet men, people that hack up all the trees in a campsite, and these are some that are a little more remote. They're not in actual campgrounds or something like that. It's just some campsite areas that people have used over the decades and such. But to go around and see that somebody's just literally had nothing to do but just take a hatchet and just chop into every tree, anywhere in sight. Just start chopping on it, and it's just bleeding sap all over everywhere. Some of the trees have got disease and such as that, I mean, yeah, that kind of stuff really makes me go wacko. So I don't like that at all. And, so I'm not, when I start out on this kind of track of conversation, some people might all of a sudden start to think that I don't believe in any aspect of a leave no trace type situation, and that's not exactly true either. Other things that bother me is people that go in somewhere. I mean, I've seen people go way back in somewhere and they cart all this stuff back in there. They have their camp, and when they leave, it's like they leave everything behind but their backpacks and sleeping bags, and it's just a mess. And, that just drives me wild too, I mean, to me, leaving a bunch of garbage behind and stuff like that, that's as bad as it's about as bad as you can do, as far as being irresponsible out there. And and that kind of stuff ruins it for everybody else. Some other things is some of these areas you go into, people have obviously decided to practice a little shooting, shooting their gun and all that sort of their guns. And, hey, I don't have any problem with any of that. But, do they have to really, shoot into a pine tree or whatever, enough times to try to see if they could cut it in half with the bullets from their guns, I mean, just stuff like that. It's just kind of stupid things that people do. And one probably mainly one other thing that would probably make up the majority of my complaints with people out there, and that is campfire building. So here I am getting around. Campfire seems to be one of the huge issues that people deal with when talking about leave no trace. Aside from walking on the ground, well, maybe I should mention that as another peeve. Anyway, but you go in an area and every 10 feet there's another campfire. It's like that just looks ugly. It's just crazy. I don't know. People's like, oh, I want to start my own campfire pit, or whatever. And, so, some of that's just a little common sense, you know what I mean? Sometimes somebody wants to build a campfire right in the middle of the most scenic spot and kind of ruin the scenery of it. So, there's a little common sense that can be exercised by people, and part of my point of my little blog piece that I wrote was just, if we have a little common sense, you don't have to make 100 different rules about something. Just kind of, if you enjoy the location you're at and you're just enjoying the camp there, just think about it. You don't want to leave it a mess. You'd want to leave it so, you get home and tell some friends, hey, I camped at such and such. That's a beautiful spot. And then you want to bring them back to it, If you leave the place just a garbage pit, I mean, you're probably not going to want to be bringing people back. So, just think of the future. That's part of it. How would you like to have found that spot? Somebody been there before you and trashed it all up. So, I think that's part of the deal. I do have an issue that I just kind of commented on right at this start of that last little bit there. And that is, I think some of the preservation efforts, maybe, I don't know, I think they go too far in some cases. you get in some areas where, the land management people or whoever, post signs all over, stay on the trail. Don't take one step off the trail into the fragile into the fragile nature of the soil. You're going to ruin the biological thing that's going on there. And you're looking around, it just looks like dirt. And I know there is stuff in there, obviously, but yeah, there's some kind of cycle going on there for sure. But it's like, and I mentioned like in my blog is, we live on Earth. We're part of the Earth. We're part of the whole cycle of things here. We're not some strangers that dropped off on a spaceship or something. At least that's not what I think. And so we don't have to treat the whole Earth like it's some museum or like it's the library. You better whisper or something. I mean, it's, to me, the Earth is something to be enjoyed. The outdoors, looking at the beauty, hiking in places, camping different places. I mean, that's part of the joy of it all. It's using the natural resources properly is something that, to me, enhances your stay out there. So anyway, so that's kind of where I come from. Now, some of the things that I think is, I read some of the old books, some of the Seaton and some of the old guys, Kephart and a bunch of those guys. Some of the things I enjoyed reading some of those old books is just seeing all the clever little contraptions that these guys came up with. Some of the fire suspensions for holding pots over the fire. Oh, they had so many different kinds of fires and stuff like that. Different kind of shelters and shacks and shanties and all kinds of different things like that. How they'd set up their camp, different kind of tent structures. I mean, there's so many different things. It's just, it's just incredible. To me, that stuff is just interesting. And when I get out, I like to try some of those things. You read something from 100 years ago or that, hey, this is what I like to do, and get out there and try doing it yourself, see what you think about it, And a lot of these things involve you bring some things with you to the outdoors, and other things you're utilizing what's in the outdoors. And to me, that's kind of an educational experience, because I think it enhances our creativity as people, where we bring what we can with us, what's practical, and then we try to make up whatever else makes us comfortable with what we find in our surroundings. So that, stimulates your brain to be creative and try to think, hey, I can do this or I can do that, and that's part of the fun experience to me of being out, is just seeing what the heck you can come up with. And if you have a place where you have an extended camp, well, you can make up quite a few little camp gadgets out of different sticks or rock or whatever there is in the area. Things you can carve up or make up or lash together. And you can make yourself just a cool little camp, I mean, that is so exciting. And the leave no trace philosophy, would mean you carry everything you need in there, and you don't make a mark, you don't touch anything hardly. If you didn't have to, if you could walk on air and not touch the ground, that would be the ultimate thing. So you wouldn't actually have to touch anything. And to me, and I'm not want to get on anybody about it. I mean, if you believe that, I mean, that's okay. If you want to live that, I don't want to go to that extreme. I want to be practical and common sense. To me, I mean, your feet stepping on the ground, that's part of the texture of being outdoors. You walk across some areas and the ground is kind of soft and spongy, like it's cushioned, and other is rocky and hard and rugged, and careful you don't trip your ankle, twist your ankle as you're going through it. There's so many different land textures that you cover walking across things and everything. I mean, that's part of the nature of it, is the feel. The other thing is the smells of where you're at. And to me, the one of the things I enjoy is the smell of the campfire. Is that not to be excessively smoky, but just a little wisp of that smoke here and there. Just to me, you smell that in your nostrils, and it's like heaven practically. You're just you really just enjoy it. And it's amazing. Just some of those things can pop memories into your head from 20 or 30 years ago. And so, to me, that's part of the whole outdoors experience. And to me, it involves utilizing some of the environment. So I'm not so particular that I would want to not touch anything. That's part of what I like. For example, now, a lot of times since we developed the poncho that we use that makes into a hammock or a tarp or a lean-to shelter or whatever, a lot of times, I'm sleeping in the poncho set up as a hammock. And so, a lot of times that's how I'm doing it. And when I do that, if I'm in the area with some young white pines or firs or some of those kind of trees that have kind of a softer bark, I'll typically do something, hang in the hammock to try to alleviate, cutting the bark all to pieces and stuff like that. And, so I'm not going to purposely destroy something just for the heck of it. And, but, if I'm in areas with, pine trees that have the older, tougher bark, or the quakies, we call them quakies, quaking aspen, quakies around here. Typically the bark on those trees is pretty tough. I mean, hanging a hammock will leave a little mark on the tree where it rubs off that whitish powdery coating on the bark. But you rarely ever will cut into the bark at all. So I mean, that's pretty leave no trace as far as that goes. But other times I want to, just on the circumstance, I want to sleep on the ground. And typically in that situation, obviously I could bring a nice sleeping pad along, anything from something that costs a few dollars to some of those that are $150 or something like that. And, I could do that, or I could do what I do. And, if I'm in an area where there's pine trees, or Utah where I live is pretty much all cedars or junipers. And I'll go along and just snap off some boughs, just whatever you can snap off with your fingers. And, I'll make me a pile of those. It's arrange them so that uncompressed, they're about a foot thick and a little wider than my body, and about from my head to the back of my knees long. And then I'll put my blanket down on top of that and crawl in and make myself, that's my bed. And I don't really, it's kind of funny because the way things have gone these days, it almost makes you want to feel guilty because you do that. But, I don't feel guilty. Now I do exercise some characteristics where I'm not denuding a whole tree, which, where I in a survival situation had to shelter up somehow. I mean, I wouldn't waste my time walking around a lot. I'd just grab whatever's closest and use it. But, when I'm out like this, I mean, I'm not in that kind of situation. So, I might snap a few pieces from each of 10 trees, kind of scattered around, and you'd be hard pressed if you're just walking through there. You'd be hard pressed to even know anybody did anything. So, I don't see that causes a problem. Now, obviously, and I think I mentioned that in my blog, if you're in an area that's heavily used by the public, I mean, you can't go do that because everybody can't do that. I mean, everything would be dead, all the vegetation be gone. But I'm talking about, I rarely go to a regular camping area other than, if we got a big family kind of get together, whatever. We usually do because it's convenient for bathrooms and water and stuff like that, and taking care of all that stuff. So in that situation, I'm pretty light on the land. I just bring most everything with me. But most of the time when I'm out, I'm not in any campground of any kind. I'm wandering around till I decide I want to stop and make camp, and I stop and make camp wherever it looks good to me, and probably nobody's ever been there before doing that. So, whatever I do, I'm not impacting anything to any kind of degree that would matter. And another thing, sometimes you want to hang a pot or something over a fire, so you want to make a pot suspension, and so you might make a tripod out of 3 sticks. You might, make a different kind of suspensions out of a couple sticks and a long boom or something like that. And I don't have a problem cutting a little bit of some small live trees or whatever, depending on what you're making, whatever you got to do. Depends on the situation, but I'm not opposed to doing some of that to build some of these conveniences. Now, obviously, I mean, to me, if I'm in an area that's really sparse on vegetation and you can see that everything's struggling to survive or whatever, I'm not going to do some of that stuff. But when I'm back into native virgin areas that are just, teeming with life, everything's growing nicely and all that sort of thing, I'm going to go ahead and take some of that stuff, and it kind of acts like thinning things a little bit. I mean, what I do is not going to really have any kind of noticeable impact on anything in the long term. And so, that's what I'm going to do. If I want to set up a camp that I'm going to come back to, maybe a number of times, I may make some stuff and leave it set up there. And I don't see a problem with that either. Again, in an area that's a little more remote and not widely accessed by a lot of people, so you're not combining some big impact, but, just common sense to me. I do that. But if I'm in another different style of area, maybe when I leave, I might take everything apart or whatever, kind of stash it around so I'm not visibly leaving something that says, hey, here was a camp. Sometimes I do that, Sometimes when I'm in an area, when I get done, I will have built my fire in a way that there's not much left of it, and I can easily distribute around what's there. I mean, ash from a fire is a fertilizer. Some of the forestry people say that sometimes forest fires, part of what they do is reduce some of the growth in the forest to ashes, which helps to fertilize the ground and helps keep the forest healthy for the next cycle. So it's not like I'm poisoning the ground with something, and that's what some people, like some of the people I think that's probably talked to Steve that I mentioned earlier, that's what some of those people are kind of getting at is hey, you don't want to leave even a tablespoon of ashes or something, or that's just going to be unacceptable. And I don't subscribe to that at all. Not one bit. So, that's kind of my take on things, and I'm not putting this out, if anybody's listening to this and I'm not out to anger anybody that's really into Leave No Trace. Because it's kind of like what you want to do. If you want to live your life in that style, that's fine. One of my sons, his friend, he's a big time fly fisherman, And he was so intense in his methodology and what he did that he would almost get into fights with people when they were fishing if they caught a fish and they kept it to eat. You know, he was so intent that every fish caught should be caught and put back in the water. And, you know, to me, if I go fishing, I'm not that good at fishing. So if I catch a fish, I'm keeping it and I'm going to eat it. So, you know, so to me, so see, that's a different opinion. This other guy, I mean, he's like, you know, catch and release. Me, I'm catch and eat, you know, unless it's out of the range of what you're supposed to keep, you know, aside from that. But so I mean, there's different philosophies. There's some people that love the leave no trace thing because it challenges them in a way of trying, because you're having to take everything with you because you're not going to use any natural resources at all. So that means everything they do has to be ultra light so that they can take enough with them and still be light enough to make the trip. So whereas on my end of things, you're not so worried about it because you're going to utilize some of the things in nature. So you don't have to worry so much about reducing the ultimate weight of your pack. But, I mean, so it's different philosophies. I mean, so it's a challenge. One way is how to be ultralight, what can I do? And people go nuts over that. Some people really get ridiculously crazy about, you know, the little ounces and parts of ounces that they save. They do some amazing stuff. Now, on the other hand, there's people that take almost nothing with them because they're going to use everything from nature. So I mean, you can challenge yourself from one way or another, and I kind of hate to see the aspect of things try to turn to where everybody would be forced to have to go one way or the other. Because I don't think either way is necessarily has to be the right way, whether it's leave no trace or camping in the old conventional style, which one thing Chris pointed out in his article is some of the guys like, you know, Westcott and some of those others, some of those guys that are kind of involved in kind of the resurgence of classic camping, which kind of gets back to doing some of the things in the ways done in the 1800s and early 1900s, or in that time period, like in other words, 1850 to 1920 or something like that, you know. And so those guys are kind of heading up a little bit of a resurgence of that, which is kind of interesting. And really in no way are any of those guys, you know, killing the environment off or anything like that. But they're just using some of natural resource environment to enjoy the outdoors. That's really, you know, to me it's like gardening. If you're growing some of your own food, you have kind of an appreciation. You get in touch with the soil. You get in touch with nature by planting and fertilizing and weeding and harvesting vegetables and stuff, and so that kind of makes your meal a little more memorable because you've been involved in that whole process. The same thing goes for the way that I like to camp, because I'm using a little bit of the resources in the outdoors. I'm using some of those as part of my camping experience. So just like gardening gets me in touch with the soil and that sort of thing, camping and using, you know, a little campfire. And I'm not one, by the way, I'm not a big bonfire kind of guy typically. I mean I go out, I have a reasonable size fire, you know, designed for whatever I'm doing. But that's part of what I enjoy out there, and that's part of the joy I have in my outdoor experience. So basically, I'm just, you know, whatever your desire is out there, you know, do live your life the way you want to out there. Have some common sense. Treat the outdoors and the environment properly. But to me, don't worry about the little nitpicky stuff like that. And just be practical and common sense. Exercise some common sense when you're out. And whether you're an ultralighter, whether you're more conventional camper or whatever, enjoy your time to the best you can. I mean, that's why we go out. And so anyway, that's my 2 bits, 3 bits, 4 bits, whatever it is by now on the subject. And take it or leave it. I know probably a lot of people won't agree with what I say, and maybe others will, but I just wanted to put out kind of my feelings on things and how I think about it. And most of what I'm saying, I think, just reflects on just being moderate and common sense, exercising common sense about what you do out there. So anyway, Perry Peacock, Wilderness Innovation. Hope everybody enjoys their time in the outdoors, and in my view, don't worry about using a little bit of the natural resources to enhance your time out there. So enjoy your time out, be safe, be courteous, be considerate of people that follow you, and whatever you do, try to leave things pleasant and nice when you get done. So take care, and I'll be with you on the next audio cast, the next video or blog. And take care and enjoy your time.